All right, we're recording. We're doing this thing. Special episode. Sound the alarm. We're going to be talking about introductions on podcasts today. Super stoked to have podcast extraordinaire Sam Girton here. Sam, how's it going, man?
Oh, Casey, I'm doing great and so excited to talk about this. Let's go.
Okay, let's talk about introductions in a podcast. And we have what's called the perfect introduction. We have the recipe for making an absolutely great introduction, and I can't wait to share that with everyone here today. I'm excited about it. It starts the whole show off with a bang. It's fun. It loops everyone in. And so the things I want to talk about today, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. First and foremost, what is this thing called the Ringmaster Perfect Intro? Why do you need one? Why should you think extra about the start to your show? It's really important that you start off right. We're going to talk about why that is. Then we're going to talk about what a bad intro is, what a bad podcast intro sounds like. There's 3 different things, and we're going to talk about those. Finally, we're going to talk through the recipe for greatness. What is it that makes for a great podcast intro? Or in our case, the Ringmaster Perfect Intro, TM. All right, so before I get started, here's some stuff like, let's hear what that sounds like, and let's hear an example of what a good intro sounds like. Right now, let's drop one in from one of my shows. Boom, let's hear that. And there we go. We have left the station. We are on the roller coaster, about to go up the hill and introduce you to this crazy cool person. I can't wait to introduce you to her. She is an absolute badass, entrepreneur, go-to-market expert, startup advisor, and her approach is the kind that I like, jives with me. No excuse, no bullshit, get results. Love that approach. Founding member of Tech Ladies, fractional CRO to several growth-focused companies, CEO and founder of Abaloo, Pardees, Safidaze. Welcome. All right, great. So now we've got an awesome intro. Let's talk about why you need to have the perfect intro for your podcast for 3 reasons. 1, you got to start off with energy. And you're letting everyone know this is how much energy there's going to be. You're going to let your guests know this is the standard we're setting with this. It's going to be fun. It's going to be high energy, or maybe it's low energy. Maybe it's chill. Maybe you're NPR. Either way, you got to let your audience know what can they expect. Are they going to get a yelling, screaming guest the whole time? Are they going to get a quiet, introspective guest the whole time? I don't know, but you should let them know by telling them with a good intro. And so not only just the words you say, but how you say the intro sets the energy for the whole show. It's you. Yes, the guest will be great, but you got to let the guest know this is where we're starting. That's number 1. The second reason why you need a perfect intro for your podcast is because you set your guest up for success. You're going to be propping them up. You are your guest's hype man, and you're going to let them know what is up. And you can only do that if you've got a great introduction. If you stumble on the introduction, if you stutter a little bit, if you make a mistake on the introduction, yeah, you could laugh it off, or maybe just re-record that thing, because you got to hit it right. You got to show your guest that you're really thinking about them. And there's nothing like a terrible introduction to just set your guest up for success. Have you ever been told, man, you really suck at this? Okay, now go ahead, talk to the whole group about something you're really proud of. You're like, man, I kind of just want to go in a corner and cry. I don't really feel like doing an introduction. I don't really feel like presenting. So it's the same thing. You're letting your guests know exactly why they're here. Many times guests suffer from that terrible thing called imposter syndrome. You ever felt that? You don't really feel like you should be here. I don't really feel like I should be teaching you how to do an intro for a podcast, but here I am. Because you know what? Somebody set me up for success too. My producer extraordinaire, Sam, here saying, let's learn together. So I'm here to do that. But yeah, sometimes your guests feel like, I don't know, should I be the one to talk about this topic? I'm not an expert, am I? Yes, you are. Most people give themselves less credit than they should. And you're here to bring them up, put them on the center spotlight, and tell the world how awesome they are and that you can't wait to learn from them. So it sets your guest up for success. And you're telling them how important they are with a good introduction. If you haven't researched it, if you don't know what you're talking about, or you just downplay it, expect a downplayed guest. If you tell the audience that your guest is Superman, expect Superman to show up. Finally, the third and final reason why a perfect intro is totally important for your podcast is you hook your audience in. your audience doesn't have to listen to you. There's a lot of podcasts out there, and yours is just one of them. And they gave you a click, and they're listening to that first 5 seconds. Maybe you had a hip hop intro, you had a kind of a cool intro, and they're like, okay, let's give this one a shot. And then you start talking, and you're super low energy. You don't know what's going on. You start talking about making toast with raspberry jam on it. And they're like, why is he talking about this? I came to a marketing podcast, right? How you start off your whole podcast, and when you introduce your guest, it sets a signal to your audience. Hey, thanks for giving us a click. Guess what? Not only are we going to give you exactly what you expect, but we're going to go more. We're going to make an amazing podcast. So the perfect introduction hooks your audience in with energy, with excitement, and with the credentials that make them stop for a second and go, wait a minute, I want to learn from that person. Or I want to hear that story, or I want to hear the inside scoop. What actually went down there? So you're hooking your audience in. So the 3 reasons that you want to have a perfect intro is that you start your show off with high energy, you set your guest up for success, and you hook your audience in, and they are on board for a great show.
I'm ready to run through a brick wall. That was awesome. That was great. Now, we know why we need a great intro.
Right.
So what is the perfect intro? What is that Ringmaster perfect intro?
I think before we can talk about what the perfect intro is, we should talk about what the worst intros are, or what not to do. When you introduce your guest on a podcast, there are 3 things you never want to do. The first thing is, hey, tell me about yourself. Hey, everyone, I've got a great guest here. Yada, yada, yada. Guest, I know everything about you, but go ahead, you tell me about you. Now, let me tell you why this is a terrible intro. You never want to ask your guest to introduce themselves. When you ask your guest to introduce themselves, you're sending 2 bad signals out. You're sending a signal to your guest that you may or may not care that they're there. You don't necessarily know who they are, or maybe you do, but it's very unsure, and you're not sure. And so you're sending a signal that says, I may not really want to be here. And guess what? Your guest may then reciprocate that signal and not want to be there either. That's not a good signal to send. The other signal you're sending is to your audience. You're telling your audience, you may or may not care about this guest either. And do you think that's going to encourage them and inspire them to give you a listen, to listen even one more second when there's 30,000 million other podcasts out there? I don't think so. So don't send bad signals. Don't ask your guests to introduce themselves. It's a recipe for failure. The other thing to avoid doing when introducing your guest on a podcast is reading their biography. Biographies can be fun. I learned about Eli Whitney in the Cotton Gin, but guess what? That's not what we're here for. We're here to have an exciting podcast and learn about the guest who we're about to talk to. And that does not happen in a biography. Why? Because in a biography, you can write as much as you want. I once wrote a 2-page biography about myself, and I'm no one special. Imagine a biography about your amazing speaker and a guest on your show, how long that bio can be. But guess what? Nobody wants to hear that. If you ever go to a conference, you don't hear a biography read out to you on a parchment scroll. That's not what we're here for. We're here for a high energy podcast. So if that's the case, you need a quick, fun, happy, very informative introduction of your guest. And that's going to set them up to win. That's going to set them up to be a great guest. Set your guest up to be a great guest. It's your responsibility to prepare them. And it's your responsibility to give them that nudge at the very beginning and tell them you're here for a reason and I can't wait to learn from you. There's nothing more low energy than reading an introduction. Do not read your introduction. You can't do it. You have to pull it out from some bullet points. And if you have lots of bullet points and you get lost in them, you run the risk of having a low energy introduction. And that just sets your guest up for failure. The final thing you want to avoid doing, and it sounds ridiculous that I have to even bring it up, is being disrespectful and irrelevant. The show is not about you. It's about your guest. So let's prop them up. It's not time to mention side tangent things. It's not time to mention all the things that you think are funny and silly, but don't forget your audience. Give them a reason. All those accolades that your guest earned, share those with your audience. I once heard an introduction of a CMO, author, and absolute business leader introduced as a working mom and very nice person. Do you think that sets your guest up for success? I don't think so. It also makes you, as the host, look like an idiot. Don't do it. Make sure you're conveying your respect and how honored you are to have the guest on the show with you in the introduction. make sure your introduction is relevant to the audience that's listening. It's great that your guest loves Snickers and loves basket weaving and peanuts. But guess what? Some people may be allergic to peanuts and it's not relevant to the audience of your podcast. So don't bring it up. So let's summarize here. What is a bad intro? A bad intro is where you ask your guests to do the introduction for themselves, or where you start reading their biography and put everyone to sleep. It could also be where you're accidentally disrespectful and you don't share the accolades that your guest earned. And finally, a bad intro is irrelevant to your guests. They don't really care about the things you're bringing up, and they're not going to listen to your episode.
So, all right, we've got why you need an intro, and we've got what not to do. Let's kind of put together the pieces of what you need to do and what your intro should have. What are the essential parts of the perfect podcast intro?
What a great question. That's an absolutely great question. The recipe for a perfect introduction has these 5 elements. The first is feelings, then superlatives, then awards and accomplishments, finally titles, companies, and then the full name. In that order: feelings, superlatives, awards, titles, and the full name at the bottom. Think of it as an inverted pyramid. The perfect introduction is a pyramid that's flipped upside down. How did they do that? I don't know. Anti-gravity boots, maybe. With this pyramid, the things you say at the top of the introduction are much more loose and more feelings-based and more pie in the sky. And as you get lower and lower in the pyramid, the things you're sharing get more and more serious. Concepts condense and you finalize with more and more concrete facts about your guest until you finalize on the absolute most important thing and the most concrete and factual thing, which is their name, their full name. That's a perfect intro. Let's dive in. First up, feelings. At the very beginning of your podcast introduction, you need to share how you feel about the guest being on your show, how you feel about them as a person, how you feel about them as a professional. How do you feel? This gives us context for why we should listen to anything else. And it can be great that they have a PhD. It can be great that they have a book, but nothing sets us up to want to listen more than to hear that the host that we love is really excited to learn from this person. Your enthusiasm is infectious. We can't wait to learn from the guest because you can't wait to learn from the guest. So at the very beginning of your introduction to your guest, share how you feel. Come on, man. Don't be a stick in the mud. Don't be a tree trunk. Share how you feel about this guest. That's going to encourage us all to stick around. A great example of this is, I am so excited to introduce this guest. This has been someone that I've met and I've talked to, and every time I see him at a conference, I can't help but smile, and then I start laughing soon thereafter because they're always full of the next joke. I love this person. Or if you don't actually know this person just yet, maybe you've had a quick prep intro. I am so excited to talk to person. I can't even imagine that they're on this show because, man, they are such a brilliant scholar. And this feeds into the next part. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be short. It's just a little bit of a tangent. It's just a little bit of context for your audience. And make it authentic. Make it truthful. Don't bullshit. If you really don't like this guest, you should uninvite them anyways. Okay? This is all about being truthful to your audience. You owe them the truth, but tell them how you feel. This is someone I'm challenged by. This is someone who excites me. This is someone who this morning, when I woke up this morning, I couldn't wait for the day to get done so we could get to this particular hour on this particular calendar day so I could introduce this guest. This makes your guest feel awesome. This lets your guests know that you feel too, you uncaring stick in the mud. Let them know how you feel. This lets your audience know that they should listen and lets your guests know that they're in the right place. It tells your guest the context for the kind of interview you're going to have. This guest is an absolute jerk and I can't wait to embarrass them. Well, that would set the tone for sure, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for your feelings on the topic. After you tell everyone how you feel about talking to your guest, you're going to quickly find yourself dropping hints about who they are. This is done with superlatives. This is a word you probably haven't used since junior high. Those are those things in the back of those yearbooks that say most likely to this, most likely to that, least likely to this. Did you have any of those in your yearbook? That's what we're going to talk about next in the introduction. And what these really are words and labels and tags of your guest. Maybe they're a serial entrepreneur. Maybe they're a seasoned marketer or thought leader. Maybe they're a marketing leader and thought leader. Maybe they are an absolute hustler. Maybe they're a terribly caring and kind person and an absolute innovator in their space. You hear all these examples? Let's listen to a couple more live from some shows. He's a serial entrepreneur, but not just, hey, I mean, I've started companies, but this guy has had several successful exits where your company is acquired, which means he's doing right. He's finding that product market fit. He's growing companies. He's all about scale. And he's a business mentor. He's a growth marketer, a lead gen expert, and really, I would say a marketing thought leader in the space. Again, all about scaling companies. We're going to dive into that today. Right. Those are some great examples. We've got some words thrown out, but notice nowhere have we shared the name. When you're doing the superlatives, don't share the name yet. You might have heard me mention that earlier. I'm going to keep saying this the entire video. Don't share the name yet. It's not time. In the superlatives, we're letting our audience in on a secret. We're letting them in on a couple clues about who this person is. And the clues drive us crazy, and we want to know who it is. Giving your audience clues to your guest is going to inspire them to at least listen to the end of the intro, and that's what you want. Superlatives are great. How many am I looking for? 3 to 5. Go crazy with 8, but keep it to within a sentence or two. You want to keep it moving nice and quick. After sharing some hints and clues about who your guest is, we now want to start sharing more concrete things. Remember that inverted pyramid? Bling. Now we want to start getting more concrete with the kind of things we're going to describe about our guest. These aren't just how we feel anymore, and they're not just words that we've tagged our guest with. Now these are accolades and awards and honors that our guest has earned themselves. And we've learned from either their LinkedIn profile, their bio, or maybe they mentioned them to us. A good example of awards might be that they were recently announced to be the 40 under 40 of this particular thing, or San Diego's top marketer, or anything else like that that really your guest is proud of. It's not so much if you think you're proud of it, but that your guest is proud of it. And typically you'll find these things in their LinkedIn profile, their resume, or even they might have told you. Accomplishments might be if they've sold or recently launched a new business. It might be an award they've received. It might also be that PhD they earned. 2 to 3 awards and accomplishments are great. If you can't find anything, consider asking, hey, what are you proud of? What's your most proud accomplishment? And that might be a great way to get that if they don't already put it out there. Bonus round. What? I thought Casey said there are only 5. Well, there are only 5, but this is a bonus round and it fits squarely under the awards and accomplishments. After listing a few awards and accomplishments, you can indeed list a fun fact. There have been some great examples of this where in your prep call with your guest, you find out something absolutely amazing, like they're fluent in Japanese and they lived there for 10 years right after college. Holy moly. That is a kind of a fun fact, or the fact that they are a professional soccer player when they're not doing their full-time job, right? You might find out a fun fact. You might even ask on your prep call for a fun fact. And if they tell you a good one, you can sneak it in here in the awards and accomplishments, typically at the end of awards and accomplishments. Lastly, if your guest has a podcast, it's a great place to shout it out at the awards and accomplishments section. Now it's time for titles and companies. If you think back to that inverted pyramid, we're getting close to the name. And as we get closer to the name, we're getting more and more concrete. We've talked about awards, and now it's time to talk about where they work. What do they do? Some people are at one company with one title. Some people are at many. This is a great thing to flag. On a prep call, be sure to ask them, hey, you're a busy guy. You're a busy gal. Do you want me to mention all of these companies and all of these titles that you have? Yes, no, maybe so. Find out on the prep call. But at this point in introduction, you're mentioning the title and the company in that order. They are currently, or they are the CMO of Ringmaster, right? They are this of that. And if they have a couple, you can mention all couple, but do it in that order. The title they have in their LinkedIn profile may not be up to date, so make sure you ask about that on a prep call too. Confirm the title and the company that they work at. Finally, we're at the end of the introduction, and that ends off on one thing, my friends, the name of your guest. You've gone through feelings, superlatives, awards, accomplishments, and even a fun fact or two, title and company, and now you're going to say the full name. First name, then last name. Welcome to the show. That's how you do it. Full name, last name, welcome to the show. Sam Gurton, welcome to the show. Casey Cheshire, welcome to the show. That's how you do it. Get in the habit of saying welcome to the show or welcome in some sort right after saying the name so that you have some way of getting off of the name and then passing it right to the guest so they know it's time for them to talk. Quick tip, ask them how to say their name on the prep call. Even if it looks like you know how to pronounce their name, it's always good to ask just in case. There's been some names that look just like regular names to me that when I asked, I found out they had different pronunciations, and the guest was actually honored and thankful that I asked and that I could pronounce them the right way. Even if your guest says, don't worry about pronouncing it the right way, pronounce it the right way. And write down phonetically on your notes how to say the guest's name so you can nail it. Practice the name 3 or 4 times before getting on the recording with your guest. It's not a time to fumble the name. Write it out like you're in 3rd grade and nail that name.
And real quick, Casey, why do you keep that name to the end? What's the reason behind that? What's going on the whole time you're building up that intro?
You are saving the name for last. And guess what? Now you can say it. Welcome to the full name part of the introduction. You get to say the name. And we've waited this whole time. I kept telling you, don't say the name, don't say the name, don't say the name. Why? Because when you save the name to the end, it creates suspense for your audience, suspense for your guest, even though they know their own name. They're in it too. Everyone's waiting to know, who is this person? The guest is thinking, is that me he's talking about? Yes, it is. It's you I'm talking about. And when you save that name to last, it explodes out of the introduction at the very end. We've had accolades, we've had superlatives, we've had all these kind of amazing things. We can't wait to know who's the guest, who's it going to be? And you're like, it's this person. Welcome to the show. And then it's time to start the show. There is no better way to start your show off with full of energy and respect and candor and excitement and fun than by doing the perfect intro. It's really great in advance to tell your guest how your introduction is going to go. That way they don't interrupt you. At the end of your introduction, when you end on their name and welcome to the show, you've encouraged them now to say hi. And so on a prep call, I'll often tell my guest, I'm going to introduce you. You say hi, and then I'll tell people the theme of the show, and then I'm going to pass it back to you to answer this first question. And the first question is so critical. We actually have a whole video on it. We have 10 hours of video. Just kidding. We have a whole video on this, and you can click somewhere over here or over there, and you can click to that video. And if you're not watching, we have a whole video on this topic. So what we have here is the Ringmaster perfect intro to a podcast guest. We've talked about why it's important, setting things up for success, starting with great energy. We've talked about what you want to avoid, like passing the responsibility on to your guest or not having enough prepared so that you accidentally sound disrespectful. Finally, we've talked about the recipe for greatness. We want to start with feelings and the context for having the guest on the show, some superlatives, some awards, titles and companies, and finally the name at the end with all that suspense. That's the perfect intro. I can't wait to hear yours.